Hi, and welcome to Friday's keynote speaker today. Hopefully by now you'll have all got the hang of the system. So I'm not going to go through the chat and the question and answer system. They should by now hopefully be all good. But you will for this session need a pen and notepad. If you haven't already got one, now's the time to just grab one. So who have we got speaking? Melanie Franklin. I almost don't think I need to introduce Mel. She's director of the Agile Change. What does she do? Right, well, she does agile transformation. That's what she does, but she not only does that, she develops the agile thinking. And probably I'd like to describe her as an enthusiastic change maker who's willing to share her secrets with us so that we can be enthusiastic change makers. So what about today's session then? So it's build to inspire others or inspire ourselves to motivate our stakeholders to make change happen. So if you're here to want to be inspired to motivate your stakeholders and make change happen, then you're in the right place. If you don't want to do that, then I should suggest you go and find a coffee, but I would recommend you stay, and I will hand over to Mel. If you've got questions, please stick them in the question and answer session and we will slip those in at an appropriate time. So over to Mel.
Thanks very much. Morning, everybody. Yeah, I said pen and paper, or you can obviously get the little stylus on your tablets working, whatever. But I just want you to have a chance to do stuff. I did not want to make this 90 minutes of listening to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lead you through some useful activities, techniques that I use all the time when I recognize that actually making change happen is all about getting people on board and making the decision for themselves. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to give that a go. I'm going to try that out. So that's what this morning's all about, is that we've jumped to really the practical activities of making change happen. This is not a lecture on change management. Why am I so passionate about this? Is because I think that right now, never before have we seen the volume of organizational change coming down the pipe like this. It's huge. There are so many things happening that I was on a call with the CEO last week where she started to talk to me about their transformation agenda. And I'm good at taking notes, but I sat there for about 10 minutes listing out every initiative that she was coming up with. And I was thinking, are you hearing yourself? Can you not hear overload? And obviously I'm going to step into that board and see if I can make things a little bit better. But I think that is that's what we're facing, aren't we? I mean, there's just so much change, and how on earth do we assimilate it? And how do we get people working differently? And it feels like when change is coming down, it feels like there's a sort of brick wall coming down on our heads. But actually, there's another one and another one and another one. And it just feels right now that actually the space where I can actually get the information in to people's heads. I need participation. I need resilience. Those are the things that make change happen. Participation is when people start to have a bit of a go, that they take ownership, and resilience is when they've got that determination to keep going and they can cope with that level of change. So I think that actually levering up a little bit of space in people's heads to be able to cope with all the changes coming down on top of them is really what we need to focus on. And I'm going to give us some activities to do that. And if we run quick through the activities, I'll throw in a few more. If we run slow, then we'll do a few less. But what we're going to do for the next 90 minutes or so is we're going to have a practice at stuff. So that's my plan. The thing that I'm interested in is taking us through this behavioural change life cycle, really. It's all about trying to understand, what people are going through when they go through change. I think when I look at interest and positivity, I'm making the assumption today that we've jumped ahead because we've already set the awareness and we've already sort of tried to get people on board with the idea of our change. If we haven't done this, then there are lots of activities and you can come and talk to me about that. I run an entire coaching course on how we get people involved in change. But the reason I'm interested in participation is that's when it becomes real, that those who are impacted by change, those who have to work differently in the future, have decided that they're going to make the first step through changing how they do things. They realize that they need to stop doing some things. They need to start doing some other activities. They've made that decision in their own heads. And that is the bit that's fascinating about change, because that's what we have to trigger. We are the catalysts for that behavioral change. We are not people that can make people change. What we can do, we trigger their interest in it. We trigger their belief in it. We trigger their willingness to, oh, go on then, I'll give it a go. And of course, the other thing that interests me is that the easier I can make participation, the easier it is to get involved in the change, the less I have to call on emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is that ability to bounce back when things haven't gone that well. It's that ability to dig in and go, oh God, I'm really worried about this. I'm scared of this, but I'll give it a go anyway. And of course, resilience makes a huge call on us. It makes a huge call on our ability to sort of focus and to dig in and therefore deal with stress. So it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. So I want to make getting involved in change and taking the first step and then the next one and then the next one as easy as possible. Because if I can do that, then people are on the journey. And one of the interesting things about the brain is that the brain kind of likes to it likes to honor what's already happened. So if you've taken a few steps on the journey, this is why we think, oh, I've invested some of my time and energy. Oh, I'll keep going then. We actually don't like turning back because the brain sees that as a waste of all of the effort it put in originally. So you increase your likelihood of success the more steps people take through the change. So we're going to make sure that we break that piece of work into tiny little steps. And we encourage people to take those little steps, because the more of that they do, the more likely they are to see it through to the end, which is really what we're interested in. And we're interested in our ability to participate in the change, for us to apply these techniques to ourselves, and we're interested in applying those techniques to others. So I thought I'd take you through that. And I thought the first thing I'd sort of bring to our attention in that actually there are two solutions for increasing participation in change. And the activities that I've got for you basically, in many cases, bring the two of these together. But these sort of approaches are in the eye of the beholder, because sometimes I'm going to give you a technique where you actually see that as problem-focused coping. So what it is that I'll provide solutions to you to the difficulties of new ways of working. And that gives you a chance to sort of confront them head on. And that enables you to feel that you're in control, because you've got a way forward. And you know what it is you have to do and how you can do it. And therefore, there's the problem-focused coping is actually, giving people solutions to how they might do something. But equally, if not yet more important, is the emotion-focused coping. And the emotion-focused coping is that this is where we reduce the negative emotions triggered by sort of having to stop existing ways of working and take on new ways of working, and there's lots of positive psychological techniques we can use to create the support and the view that, well, it's not as bad as I thought, or well, it could be kind of useful. It's all of those changing your viewpoint moments that we're interested in as well. So the techniques I'm going to share with you this morning, depending on how you view the world, you're either going to see them as practical solutions and problem focused, or you're going to see them as me helping you see the world in a different way, and they help you address change emotionally. Only it matters really. It's not important to label them. It's just important to recognize that that's basically what we have to do all the way through change. A lot of what I'm talking about here is informed by neuroscience, and some of you, I think, were on my webinar last night. There was hundreds of you on the webinar last night about how we apply neuroscience to change management. And I don't think that the extension of the change management profession into this world of neuroscience is a bad thing. I think it just gives us a whole range of new ways that we can better connect and reassure people as they make their own way through that transition from old to new ways of working. So let me get straight on with it then. Let's start with generating participation in change. So first activity for you is coming up very soon. I think the first thing we need to recognise is that what holds people back from change, you might have won the argument with them and they're going, yeah, okay, we do need to move to this new system, or we do need to move to this new process. So you've kind of won the argument, but then they get stopped by, I don't know where to get started. And we've all been in that mess, haven't we, where something seems so big and so overwhelming, you think, I just don't know where to start. And what if I start with the wrong thing? What if I start with something that isn't important and that isn't useful? Oh, what if I should be doing something else with my time? So what happens is that, of course, we procrastinate because you think, I don't know where to get started. It seems like such a big thing that I'm getting involved in. So, of course, what we need to look at is that network of interconnected activities. So get people to start with sort of brainstorming. What do you think are all the things we'll need to do to make this change a reality? That's great, because that's what we might call sort of divergent thinking, just brainstorming, free association. Anybody and everybody can take part in that because everybody's going to have a perspective. So immediately you've got people engaged, you've got them doing something that isn't hard, because what they're doing is calling out, oh, we should do that. What about this? And don't forget that. And that's fantastic. But when you've got that huge list, it looks more like that diagram on the right, doesn't it? Because when you start to think about it, you start to realize that, oh, this bit's connected to that bit, and there's that bit, or which bit should I start first with? And people think that there must be a right answer. So they hesitate because they think, well, maybe if I haven't got it right, maybe I'm starting with the wrong thing. And it's that hesitation that we want to overcome. And the way in which we can achieve that is we can help people by saying, actually, whatever is right for you is a good first step. Because what you want people to do is find something that for them will give them a clearer picture of what to do next. So take that little first step. Now, you can do it all sorts of ways. You can use a Moscow prioritization, and you can say, this is a must-have. This is really important. This gives us the greatest benefits. Let's go for that. Alternatively, you might find that it's a more personal thing. Which one do I find easiest? What one sits with me best? What am I going to most enjoy? What do I find easy to do? Maybe that won't take me very long because I'm really skilled in that area. Or maybe there's something in there that calls to you that you really want to do because you find the most valuable. It feels the most significant. It gives you something where you think, yeah, I'm definitely going to go for that. It kind of flies in the face of what we were brought up to think as children, which is that there's always sort of that logical flow. You've got to have your dinner before you can have your dessert. And in a way, I'm kind of flexing that, aren't I? Because I'm saying, go on, eat the dessert first if that's what you want. If that gets you eating, eat the dessert. Yeah, maybe you come back to the main course later. You know, but the main thing is that you've taken a step on the journey. You've joined the table, you know, you're participating. And that's what I'm after. There are some things that we can do to help people get to this point. I'm going to look at a couple of them. The first is getting people to think about their preferences and having an open conversation with them about the things they like and the things that they find valuable. And then I'm going to give you a little chart that you can complete that will help you understand your preferences, and that will help you have a greater understanding of the preferences of others. So let me get started. I want, in finding the first step, to make suggestions all the time, remembering I'm a catalyst. You know, it's probably not me that has to change my behavior. What I'm trying to do is trigger the willingness in others. So I want to signpost people to a whole range, a menu of ways in which they can get involved. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to base that on people's preferences. Now, what you'll see on this chart is it basically brings together a whole load of different models, because I don't think learning all the academics behind it is helpful at this moment. So some of you might look and say, oh, that's a bit of Myers-Briggs type indicator. Some of you might say that that's the insights model of yellow, blue, green, and red. Some of you might see this as much more around learning styles from Honey and Mumford, for example. It doesn't matter where it comes from, it's this that we're interested in. Every one of us is somewhere along a spectrum of how we like to work. Do I like to work and bounce ideas off loads of other people and work and do something collaborative, or do I want to try and make sense of this on my own and just think through things? Do I want to get a brief summary of what's happening and the high level, or do I want all the detail? And in fact, do I want to use my own experiences? Do I want to watch others first and see what they've got? So maybe my early adopters, the worked examples, lets me reflect on the experiences of others. Maybe I want evidence, I want data, I want objectivity to help me decide how to do things. Maybe I'm more interested in a consensus decision. Maybe I'm the kind of person that I'm not the ideas creator. I don't see myself as that creative force, but actually I'm quite happy to participate and share my skills in evaluating ideas, because that plays much more to my skill set. Maybe I'm only comfortable if we can actually schedule this and organize this, and we've got a plan. Or maybe I just want to dive in and see what happens next. I'm quite happy. It's very open-ended. You know, I'm open to choice. Maybe I want to take small steps. Maybe I want to dive in. And maybe I want to look ahead for problems, or maybe I'll just react as required. There's a whole load of stuff on there. And the one thing that is absolutely core to change is that I can't decide what the right activities are for everybody, because I have no idea where they are along these spectrums. And in fact, sometimes they don't even know. It's so, automatic a response. What I do know, though, is that if I want people to take the first easy step, the biggest challenge I have I created, and can I therefore suggest this entire menu of things that people might get involved in and how they might do it. The one that really calls to me is in the middle there, around how to innovate, or how to get anything done. Because what I always make sure of in change is that I've got plenty of opportunities for people to be the creators, but I also equally value those that are the reviewers, and that I balance that out with people who will try and work out if these ideas are practical and if they can work. So immediately I am covering both sides of any group. There's always the ones who want to put themselves forward and have a go, and there's always the ones who want to hang back and have a real think about it. And I want to make sure that I've got activities that appeal to both of those. So that's personally my guiding light. So just get you thinking for a moment. Just take on board what I've said. See if you can come up with a load of activities there. Think about the things that, work for you. Just start with, have a think about either end of the spectrum. See if you can come up with some ideas. And what I'd be interested in is if you can share some of those in the chat. I'd be really interested. I think Carl's our friend for reading those out. So give it a go. Come up with anything and do share your thoughts, because it'll all be interesting.
Okay. So there's not. Am I on? I'm not sure whether I'm on or not.
You are on.
Yay,
we can hear you, Carl.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So not any chat yet, but I have got a question. Can I throw that in while we're at it?
Please do.
So the question is problem-focused coping more like solution-focused if it provides solutions. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it is. I mean, it's just another way of saying it. You know, I'm focusing on solving the problem. That's what I'm doing. And therefore, it's the practical things of we can do this, or we can do this, or we can do this. Whereas emotion focused is much more about how you see it, how you perceive something, and the opportunity for me to change you from more of a negative perception of something to a more positive perception of it, a reframing, if you like. So anybody got any ideas about some of the things along these spectrums? Anything that's making them think?
Nothing in the chat yet. I guess I'm looking at this and thinking, well, you can very quickly do a quick profile of yourself and somebody you're having to engage with. Yes, absolutely. It's about thinking about those different things. So, I mean, if you're not putting stuff in the chat, I'll give you a few examples here. It might be that what I want somebody to do is maybe explain the change to others so they can take others with them. Now, if you think about it, some people will go, do you know what? I'm best if I sort of tell a story about that. It's probably quite big picture and it's quite anecdotal, and I can give people some examples of how it's worked. And there'll be other people going, do you know what? If you gave me a model with the data in and you showed me cause and effect, I'd be really happy with that. So already a couple of simple activities. Some people are really good at telling stories and doing high level presentations. Other people are really good at diving into the detail and almost proving what we're doing. Make sure that both of those opportunities are within your change. Highlight that both are as valid as one another. And therefore you're allowing people to sort of self-sort and get on with things that they think, well, I'd really like to do that. That's what we're looking for. Yeah. Okay. I've got one comment here. It's to do with, there's no mention about identifying benefits.
No, we're not getting on to benefits. You're right, we're not getting on to benefits just at the moment. This is about hold that one. Much more on opportunities. I'm going to take you to the next bit of this then, which is, and Carl's actually just highlighted it, which is that if I want to sort of help people find the first step, maybe the thing that I can help them find is the things on the top right that they find easy and that they enjoy. Because naturally, if we talk about intrinsic motivation, that's where people are going to go to. If you're asking for volunteers, people are going to volunteer to get involved in your change, then the things that they naturally want to volunteer for are the things that they enjoy and find easy. And the things that they want to avoid are the things that they don't enjoy and they also find hard. Now, I've used myself as an example here, and I'm going to ask you to fill this chart in for a moment, in just a moment. Thinking about the things, there are things that I find just somehow they work for me. I find them naturally easy. Yeah. And there are things that make me smile. That's the enjoyment bit where you go, I'm really enjoying this. This is great. You know, that state of flow we get into with things where, you know, we lose ourselves in just the enjoyment of it. I know, for example, that when I'm trying to come up with a plan of what I'm going to say to people and transferring my knowledge, I just don't notice time passing because I'm really thinking it through. I find it naturally easy, but it's something that gives me great pleasure. So it makes me smile and I'm genuinely enjoying it. I know my colleague over there who sat outside the room right now, who works at KPMG, feels the same way about filling in a spreadsheet. He talks passionately about the poetry of how you get all the figures lined up and everything adds together. And he loves his financial models. And he finds them incredibly easy. And what's interesting about our conversations is that he struggles to understand, why do I find numbers so hard? Why can't Melanie add up? I've become more innumerate over the years, I swear, but it's because I obviously do it less often now. But it's something I've ever found easy. I find any kind of administration, any kind of completing of forms or doing the banking or filing or whatever, it just doesn't play to me. I don't enjoy it. That's one thing, but I also find it quite hard. My brain does not work in that way. I recognize that. So those are the sorts of things that I'm going to avoid. And I think there's two things we can take for this chart. The first is that really tapping into what really sings to you is the sort of stuff that you'd want to volunteer for, the kind of activities that you'd want to do in the change initiative. And therefore, people who are like you and see the world the same way you do, well, that's going to work for them. But the reason for creating this chart is because I also want you to ask yourself the stuff on the bottom left that you find hard and you don't enjoy. And the reason I want you to do that is because if you can therefore identify those things in yourself, you can also identify that there's a whole load of those activities that could equally be in the top right for other people, and that therefore they are just as valid to include in as change activities. And that if you're explaining all of the potential options to people to help them find the first step, you'll have a far more comprehensive list that will connect with far more of the people impacted by change if you can cover this entire table. Now, this morning, we're just going to do top right, bottom left. But you see my point. If you only ever talk about the things that are actually your top right, and you want to talk about those because they make the most sense to you, and therefore they are the easiest for you to understand, then you are only going to be appealing to people who see the world the same way you do. And by the way, one of the reasons that those are the things that we're going to sort of offer up, put in our change plans, make the most of, if you like, is because anything that we personally sort of find easy to understand, that engages us, our brain automatically, I'm afraid, ascribes a high priority to. And those things that we find difficult to understand and difficult to do, our brains ascribe a lower priority, because our brain is actually sort of saying, oh, well, if you can't understand it, Melanie, it can't be that important. That's the problem with my own tax return. That's what my brain's saying. Well, you don't really understand it, so it can't be that important. So I go off and prioritize other things, which is why my accountant keeps saying he wants to retire. It's that natural thing. That's the way the brain behaves. So you can't help but skew your own management of change. Even if you didn't realize it was happening, it is skewed towards that top right-hand box, because your brain is saying, those things are obvious, those things are easy, we should be doing those things, they make perfect sense to me. And your change plan is leaving out an awful lot of stuff in the bottom left. And it's that opportunity to recognize that I think is really helpful, because I want us all to have a wider set of activities we can offer up to those involved in change. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to give it your own go.
I was just saying, just interesting, there's a few comments which kind of links what you just said then, this slide and the previous slide. So it's kind of hanging over from the previous slide. But there's a few comments like, it depends on what I think about the change and whether or not I think it's a good idea. It depends on who's in the room. It depends on what the task is. In other words, where people will put themselves on that sliding scale will depend. And I think that's kind of linking, I'm hearing that's linking with your next slide, which is, well, it depends on what you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's calling that out. And I'm just trying to confront us with these things that are happening in the background of our brains that we don't necessarily notice. But this was a real seminal moment for me when I realized in learning this, that it's absolutely right, that my change plan is stuffed full of activities that are in my top right, because they make perfect sense to me. They're easy for me to understand. And what I am doing inadvertently is excluding a number of my stakeholders. I'm not appealing to my stakeholders. I'm not giving them an easy way into the change, because I'm putting up stuff that to them looks really difficult and really stuff that they don't enjoy. I've built my own barrier to involvement in the change because I didn't know that I'd skewed it in that way. So what I'm asking you guys to do is scribble down your version of this table. Think about, first of all, play to your strengths. So think about the stuff that you find easy, the stuff that you enjoy, the stuff that calls to you, that if you had to start work in the morning, that's the stuff you'd start on. And then think about the other stuff. Then do the stuff that's hard and that you don't enjoy. Now, you've got an activity wall in this conference. So what I'd really like you to do, and I know some people have been putting pictures on that activity wall, is just put a picture up of the chart that you've got. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to give this a go. So over to you. Let's have a start.
So just to confirm, if you haven't found it, it's on the left-hand side. It's called Activity Feed in the sort of menu section of the screen. Let's have a look, see what's coming in. Can you see the chat okay, Mel?
I've got the chat from 5 months ago. I'm going to see if I can call up. I can't see any chat at all.
Right. What I've actually done is to open a separate window with the, you know, the festival link, and so looking at it through that.
Does that mean I can see it too?
If you go,
I'm on the platform. Is that what you mean?
No, I mean I've got a completely separate window open with the festival open as a, you know, as any punter would have. But it's all right. I'm just looking through it now.
So we've had one post on the activity feed from Gemma. So thank you very much, Gemma. And it did actually sort of prove my own point, really, that what Gemma's put in on the bottom left, she's put in about, she put in a variety of things, but she's one that really hit home for me was writing reports. And absolutely, that's something that is in my bottom left as well. And what's the impact of that on change? What does that do for people that I'm trying to engage in my change? Well, what it does is it blocks them, because those people who like to know, where are we? What are the reports? I'm thinking, oh, just chat to me. I'll tell you where we're up to. That's my typical informal style that really works for me. And of course, people who need more formal information and that enjoy engaging with a proper read through of a well pulled together report, well, I'm totally disengaging with them. I just don't always remember it. I don't recognize it. But just looking at Gemma's chart there has just reminded me, yeah, that's another thing I don't do. And that's therefore another thing that, you know, maybe I need to engage more with. So thank you for that. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Tell us in the chat if you're enjoying the activity, but more to the point, just take a quick snap and put it on the activity feed. It's really easy to add. And it's just great to see some of this stuff up on there. And as we've invested in this big platform, we want to be using it. So it just comes up, add photo on there. So, you know, just add one in there and have a look, because there's some great stuff in there. Oh, thank you, Jeanette. That's another one in there. Yeah. It seems to be all getting you thinking, this stuff in there. You know, what is it you don't want to do, and the stuff that you do. This is fantastic. Thanks very much. It's brilliant. Yeah, just put your photos in. It doesn't, they're all hand drawn, by the way, so there's nothing fancy in there on the activity feed. It's not as if you're sort of submitting a posh diagram. You're not. You're just taking a picture of your notepad and putting that across, but it just shows the point. Hopefully what you're also getting from this is that this is such a simple activity to do with other people. And so you can get your own teams doing this. And get them thinking about, therefore, what would be your first step in the change? What would you like to do? It's going to be in your top right corner, right? And what are the things that we don't want to do? I can use this for fantastic team engagement when we're starting to think about how we're going to get started with the change, or equally as important, when we're losing impetus and we've all had enough and it's not a great day. You know, we can have a talk about this and think, is that because we're doing a lot that's in the bottom left corner? Are people feeling that for a variety of reasons they're having to do stuff that they're not enjoying, that they're finding hard? Could we buddy up with people where those activities are stuff that they find really easy, they enjoy? Could we do that? That may be a way forward. So thanks for sharing in the feed. I'm going to move on now to another activity, because I think the more I can share, the better. And also we did have a question about benefits. We've had a couple of questions about, we've had benefits, and we've also talked about how do we assess appetite and energy. So I've put up a slide about intrinsic motivation, because if I want to get to participation on the right hand side here, then people need to be motivated to participate, and that motivation comes from their enthusiasm, and their enthusiasm comes from really that intrinsic motivations, that inner fire. Now, we've just talked about allowing people to sort of, you know, basically pick the things that work for them, to be autonomous, in other words, to give people self-choice. And of course, that chart that we just looked at was about playing to people's talents, because you're sort of saying, well, what is it you find easy to do? What is it that you want to do? What do you enjoy? So that chart that we've just looked at is the personification of autonomy and mastery, playing to your talents. Absolutely. But I think the other thing when it comes to getting people on board and fired up, and therefore to have the appetite and the energy for change, is that we need to tap into the meaning of the change for them. We must enable people to find the benefits of the change for them. We've got to give them a way of finding things and go, oh yeah, that's kind of good. Oh, that's quite good. I was on an event about a year ago now with somebody who talked about change fatigue quite a lot. And he made the argument that change fatigue is a fallacy. He said there isn't anything like change fatigue. He said it is just our label for when we failed to give meaning and purpose to the change. Because if you feel that there's meaning and purpose behind what you're doing, you will always find the time and the energy for it. So the question that was posed in the chat that Carl read out to me was about how do we assess appetite and energy? And my initial reaction to that is, well, we'll do what I do with a lot of clients. It's we constantly sort of track, how are you feeling about the change? You know, do you find, have you got the time to put to this? You know, are you busy with other things? And you can do that to assess appetite and energy. But I think that if you instead do survey questions much more about what do you think the value of this change is, how would you rate the value on a scale of 1 to 10? And if you're getting ratings of 8 and 9, then you know that there's true meaning, and therefore there's motivation and energy behind this. If you are getting that people can't see the point of it, and you are getting scores around the 2s, 3s and 4s, or even in the 5s, you go, oh yeah, there isn't much energy and appetite. So hopefully that answers that question about that, because I think that's a far more useful predictor of appetite for change. And therefore, how do we generate the meaningfulness? Really what I'm interested in doing is I've got to connect. Somebody's got to go and look at that and go, yeah, actually this is helpful, this does something for me. Now, what I did was I've in my own organisation, I've put in a new communication platform over Christmas. I did a whole load of IT upgrades, and it was all about streamlining and automating what we do. So I run a sort of online training business around the world, and we have an awful lot of people who tap into that. So I have a lot of people I need to worry about, and we upgraded a lot of things to make their lives better over the Christmas period. We thought that was a good time to do it. But the thing is, you know, we're all really busy with lots of things. So I thought I'd draw up my own experience of this change, and particularly my new marketing manager and other team members have, you know, been involved in this, and what their experience is of having to change their ways of working. So I just did a benefits dependency network where I simply asked, so what? So we're going to have a new communication platform, so what? So we're going to use templates, so there's less original wording when you're answering loads and loads of inquiries from people around the world about their examinations, their change management qualifications, their courses, how to log in. You don't have to keep coming up with the ideas all the time and just use some templates. Well, so what? Well, that means you don't forget key points. Now that starts to tap into the fact that if somebody is sort of tired of having, you know, they've got so many emails and they're always behind, so using templates seems like a good thing. If they're worried about forgetting key points and therefore they're always having to really closely read their emails, moving into a sort of template thing looks like a good thing for them. Also, less rework. Well, if you're worried about the fact you're under time conditions, that seems good. Looking more professional, that's great. Greater credibility, feeling more confident. You see what we're doing here is that it's not that the end benefit might lead you to greater job satisfaction. There might be lots of little benefits on the way that would really work for you. Similarly, you know, we started a conversation in the office about working smarter, which made us feel more efficient, which meant that we felt more up to date. And of course, that led us to greater job satisfaction. And then finally, we went off on a different track and we thought, well, it tracks our work, which means others in the team can see what we're doing. So that means I don't have to update people all the time. That saves me time. There's less duplication of effort because people know what I'm working on. It's easy to see it, so they don't do what I'm doing. And that means if we're saving time, less duplication of effort, we can do more valuable work. That means we can make more impact, which means greater job satisfaction. And we just played with this as a group, looking for, well, why do I feel that there's meaning behind this? Why do I want to get involved in the change? So this technique is something that you can do really easily, very collaboratively. And all you need to do, which is why we're having a go at it right now, is you put the change on the left-hand side, whatever it is, whatever new thing you've got, just put the word new and then fill in the blank. And then off you go and see if you can go, so what? So what? So what? You know, we're working smarter. So what? Well, it makes me feel more efficient. So what? Well, I feel more up to date. So what? Well, there's greater job satisfaction. So these are all the things that you want to be looking at, is just having a play of the so what game. All right. So I'm going to shut up and let you have a go. So we'll spend a few minutes on this. So whatever the new thing is on the left-hand side, can be home related. It doesn't need to be work related. Just have a go and see if you can find a whole load of meaning for yourself in there.
So just to remind you, when you've got something, please share it in the activity feed.
It's giving people a bit of time to think, but as Carl said, any scribbles you've got, put them on the activity wall. That activity feed just lets us know that you're having a bit of a go and you're getting some value from this. We've got another activity coming up in just a moment, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes because this shouldn't be a long one. This is just it's structured mind mapping, really, isn't it? And it's just a great way of pulling stuff out your head that you didn't even know was in there. Any questions or observations about this in the chat, Carl? Anybody putting anything in that I need to know about?
No, not at the moment.
Okay then. So I'm not seeing any in the activity feed, but I'm wondering if perhaps a few of you could share if you've actually done it. Feels a bit difficult at the moment. It feels like I'm talking to, I can't see you, I can't connect with you, so it's definitely harder this morning. But let me know if there's any comments you want to make. I want to go on to one more activity. So we've only got half an hour really left together, and I really want you having a bit of a think about some of the things you can do around this particular activity, which is very much a personal development one. So if you're all finished with that, as I said, put pictures in the activity feed. Anybody want to tell us if it's useful or not useful? Has it made them think in the chat? So I'll give you just another minute to either put on the activity feed or to put into the chat. So thank you for putting them into the activity feed. It's great to see them. It's always good to understand what people are working on. So let's have a look in there. Oh yeah. Okay, so yeah, I can see some fantastic stuff that's going through all there's lots and lots of one of them, which is all around patient safety, and then there's lots of connections back to that. So there's a feeling that what that person's working on really does have a value. It has a real benefit to patients, therefore it has a big societal benefit. So there's obviously a strong call, a strong meaning to that. Then that's where the motivation sits. So that's brilliant. Thank you. So in the chat, anybody want to vote? Useful, not useful? Just tell me. It's great to get your feedback. After all, the reason I'm expecting so much feedback is you're all about change. Yeah. So engaging with people is all what we do. So I'm asking you to engage with me now.
I've got one comment here. This is a great exercise, really helpful, and a good visual.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. And thank you for the ones that are posting in the activity feed. I've got it on my phone beside me, so I'm watching them come up. As I said, this is brilliant in the kind of ways that I do this, because it's all about, as we said, connecting with other people, getting other people to see, yeah, okay, I'll put some effort in. The thing is that this is a really simple structured mind mapping technique. That's all it is, right? Always put the new thing on the left and see where you go with it. And the key thing is the so what, so what, so what. Anybody can get involved in that. You can do it in small groups. I've left people in breakout rooms to collaboratively work on it. They've got somebody scribbling it up on post-it notes if they're using an interactive whiteboard. They're even doing a basic PowerPoint if they want to. But it works really, really well because it enables people to have a great conversation about they're coming up with different ideas and different benefits, and therefore you create this real sort of feeling that yeah, there's actually lots of reasons why we should make this happen, and it's a great way to sort of motivate yourself or others. Last activity, because this 90 minutes just goes really quickly, so that's what does this do for me, is we want to generate the participation of others in change. We want to pull others through the change. And the obvious thing is that we prove it works. That's the quickest thing that we can do. And we know that role modeling is showing people that I'm giving it a go, you can as well. Role modeling creates worked examples that creates that sort of social proof that this actually works. And it creates that social magnetism, and the magnetism pit is what we're going to look at in this last activity, because it creates that feeling of, well, I want to do that too. Yeah. So it is very much around that willingness to get on board. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole thing around role modeling, finding the activity that others can follow and that illustrates your change. Yeah, that's very important. But I'm actually going to look at something different right now. I'm going to look at when role modeling works, it's because the person you're watching do it is somebody whom you have a connection. And the brain relies on a couple of sort of neuro hacks at this point. The first is that we are more likely to follow the lead of somebody that we feel in some way represents us, that we have a natural emotional connection to. And the other one is that we automatically make a subjective evaluation of the value of somebody. How important are they to us? How relevant are they? We sort of evaluate their credibility. We don't notice we're doing it, but it's very much this feeling of, do I want to follow that person? So somebody might be exemplifying your change, but if they don't have that connection and likability, really, then it's a wasted effort. And what I wanted to do is turn this onto you, really. So it's a personal development session for this morning. It's recognizing that if we're relying on role modeling, it's a form of social magnetism. I want you to be the most powerful magnet you can possibly be. I want people to go, I want to follow that person. You're the one talking people through the change. You're the one that's trying to nudge everybody to get involved. So the more powerful a magnetic force you have, the more pull you have, the more easily you can take people with you. And that means we need to look at what makes other people follow us, because that's really what we're talking about right now. We're talking about a form of not leadership, but natural followship. Other people will follow your lead. And it's that emotional connection, that respect that's going to do it. And what really doesn't have any part to play in social magnetism is structural authority. Your job title at this point isn't going to do anything for you. You know, the hierarchical power you have, the reporting line you have is going to do absolutely nothing for you, because people aren't interested in that. There are three factors though, and I'm obviously going to turn this over to you guys for you to have a go at developing yourself. So I'm going to explain these three factors, and I'm going to do them, drip feed them, so you've got a chance to think about each one separately. So the first one is that you have some kind of specialist authority. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the differential here between specialist knowledge, i.e. being a subject matter expert, and specialist authority. And the authority bit is sometimes the bit that we find hardest to create, because I might have a huge amount of knowledge. I might have studied something. It might be something I'm really interested in. So you've got all of that. So think about the things that you know a lot about, the things that you've really researched, you've had lots of experiences in. But the thing is, what makes you an authority is that other people recognize that within you. And therefore, you kind of need to publicize it to others. It isn't just qualifications or past jobs you've had. It's the experiences you've had, the things you've done, it's the achievements you've had. And there's a lot of people on this call right now that are going to find this incredibly difficult, because it's going to come right up against their imposter syndrome. Because there's a voice, a very strong voice in their head saying, well, I'm nothing special, I haven't done much. When actually you're all really special and you all do amazing amounts and you've all got achievements to your name. So the first thing is that you have to be willing to dig deep and think about those things. If you're not sure, talk to trusted friends, talk about what you're doing at work, and see the admiration in their eyes. You see it through a different lens. That's where you find your achievements. Think about the things that, as a result of your work, we're now able to do these things that we couldn't do before. You're going to have a moment of pride here. So that's the first thing, the first hurdle you're going to stumble over. And the second hurdle is, even if you've got some ideas of things that you do that are quite useful and solutions you've come up with, the other thing that's going to hold you back from this magnetic force is that you don't tell anybody about it. Now, we are not self-promoters, and we don't need to be sort of coming across as, oh, I'm wonderful, look at all the things I do. But what you can do is you can be prepared to share, very openly share your experiences. When you share your experiences, share your perspectives, Often when you sort of say, my view is this, you then go on to explain to somebody why you have that view. And when you explain that, it's you share an experience you've had, a responsibility you had, an activity you took part in. You are actually demonstrating that you have that specialist knowledge, that subject matter expertise, merely by the stories you tell about your past experience. That's not showing off, that's just telling people what you've been involved in. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is I'm going to ask you to have a really good think about something that you know a lot about, that you have achievements in, that you have experience in, and just start to think about how you might tell others about that. Because unless they know, then it's harder to go, oh, I want to follow that person because they've been there before and they probably know the journey. So specialist authority is really important. I'll shut up for a couple of minutes. Feel free to put anything in the chat, any questions to me, but take a moment to have a real think about what's the stuff you know a lot about. What makes you special at work? You're all special. One more minute then, and then I'll move on.
Yeah, we've had one comment to, share. I really struggle with blowing my own trumpet. I just feel embarrassed to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's just recognizing that actually we're providing a valuable service. Let's recast this, shall we? Let's take a little bit of a reframing moment. That you're not blowing your own trumpet. What you're doing is you've been there before. You've had an experience of something from before. Sorry, there's some very high whistling in my office because there's really high winds in where I am right now, and it sounds like it's coming through the roof. So apologies if you can hear that on the thing. But you've been there before. So what you're doing is you are basically, you're the tour guide now. You're able to signpost people and show them the route to something where you've been down that road before, so others won't get lost. And I think there is something really powerful in being able to recraft that in your mind and go, actually, I'm helping people. It's not that I'm showing off. I've been here before. I know where everything is. Now, actually, you're turning that and going, yeah, I've been here before. I know where everything is. Let me help you find stuff. That's what you're doing. That's what's different. If you are struggling with this, one of the ones that I do in a virtual environment that works really, really well, but it can obviously, it can also work very well if you go on a walking tour or if you go and have a coffee with somebody, is that you play this game where you basically talk about something that perhaps you previously struggled with, and that you're really proud that you came out the other side and you had a bit of success. So you dig deep and you think, what was something I was really struggling with, and it's now fixed, it's now better. And you tell that sort of story to each other so that you're feeling really positive and it's reminding you. And just by telling that story to somebody else, it helps pull out a load of your achievements, the stuff that you've done that you've forgotten about. So you look back at something that you were really worried about, and you look at how that, oh, I really didn't think I'd be able to pull that off. I was really nervous about doing this, and yet I did it and it was okay. And this is my story about that. And you tell it to somebody else and you see how engaged they are and how much they're enjoying that story. It helps bed down your own achievements, but it also helps you practice telling other people. And also you can then see on a one-to-one basis the realization that actually that person doesn't think I'm showing off. They just think I'm telling an interesting story. That might be another way that we can break down this overcoming our imposter syndrome. I think on International Women's Day next week, I'm publishing, if you liked that, if I just go back, if you liked this benefits dependency network that I did here and you like that technique, I'm actually going to be publishing one about overcoming imposter syndrome on International Women's Day. So you might enjoy having a look at that. It might help you with the specialist authority. The next one is interpersonal authority. We're talking here about fellowship, right? So we are talking about building relationships, and there's two parts to this, a bit like the specialist authority. The equivalent to building your subject matter expertise in the first place is to build your network. So I cannot encourage you more highly to chat to each other on this platform, to make connections with people, not just in the NHS, but in other places that are doing similar changes. But keep digging in, keep building your network. I mean, I spend my life going to webinars and to lectures and reading articles from other people, and I then connect with them. I then let them know that I really thought what they said was very useful, and we build connections. I attend to this. I put some effort into continuing to develop my network. Particularly during COVID, I realised that I wasn't going to see people face to face for some considerable time. I had no idea it was going to be a couple of years, but I knew it was going to be quite some time. And so I deliberately took some jobs that I wouldn't normally have done, because it brought me into contact with new organisations and new people that I wouldn't normally work with. And I'm really proud that that helped me extend my reach, my network. And gave me, the thing is, my network's really important to me because actually all of those connections are sources of new ideas. They are sources of solutions to the problems I have. And just hearing other people's ideas just triggers stuff in your own head, and it's great. So I do put the effort into building my network, and I challenge you to think, how much of that are you doing? I remember at the UN, in some of our more far-flung offices, there was a great deal of concern that people weren't travelling and weren't connecting with colleagues anymore. And so we set up some really simple things early on, like some online book groups, where we decided, to be honest, we realised that a book was a bit of a big reach. So we set up some online article groups where, for example, you might read an article in one of the business magazines like the Harvard Business Review or the online service from McKinsey Quarterly, and then talk about it. But it just got people turning up, and from all sorts of different countries simultaneously, and it just formed the connections. And I thought that was really useful. But it isn't just about building your interpersonal network, it's also then deploying it in a way that's useful, that makes people realize, oh yeah, she really helps, she connects people. Because somebody might ask me a question I don't know the answer to, but I'm pretty sure somebody in my network's a bit more experienced in it, and I connect them. I don't need to be a part of that. I don't need to be in the centre of that. But by connecting them, I help them solve their own problems. And I build that magnetism, which is, oh, Mel's really open. Mel's really happy to connect people and to try and find the solutions. And it is that, again, it's that magnetism piece, isn't it? About, yeah, okay, I'll follow her because Mel seems to know loads of people in loads of different places. She seems to know what's going on. And that's what your network screams to people, that you're well connected there is a respect there, there's a credibility there, because when you're well respected, well connected, people recognize, well, yeah, you seem to know a whole load of stuff that's going on.
That's probably a good place to jump in, Mel. Actually, so I've got one question. So you're talking about, connection and virtual connection, and I've got a question: is do you think the activities work as well in the virtual environment? So these, I assume, these are the activities that you've been sharing. Do they have a greater impact if people are together in the same room? So I think that's today's challenge: how to be effective without being face to face.
To be honest, I created all of these during that have been on this virtual world. To be fair, I have used them when I've done face-to-faces over the last year, but actually they seem to work brilliantly in terms of on this online world. I think we have to be quite creative on the online world sometimes, in that I was with a group yesterday who many of whom wouldn't put their cameras on. And I made the point back to them that, what we're looking for here is human connection. Albert Moravian's work tells us that 7% of my communication is the words that I use. About a third is the tone of voice you can hear from me right now, but over half is my body language. And if you're working in this virtual way and you've got your camera off, people are going in blind. They're not hearing over half your communication. So I think there are ways that we can behave really well in a virtual world, and there are other ways that we really harm our ability. But certainly I've used all of these activities in a virtual world. As I said, breakout rooms where you just pair people up and they've got their cameras on and they're in that room together bouncing ideas, works brilliantly, works really, really well. Thanks for that. So have a think right now. I know that we're coming towards the last 15 minutes, but we've still got enough time for this. Just take a moment to think, challenge yourself, right? And perhaps share in the chat if you've got any great ideas for this, particularly across the NHS. What is it that you're doing to build your network? What is it that you're doing to increase your reach? What is it that you're doing to increase the number of contacts that you have, and therefore the number of inspirational sources of information you've got? We're not just talking LinkedIn here, we're talking about across the NHS. How are you connecting up with people? So please share something in the chat. That would be good. Clearly, this is an opportunity to make a connection with me. So what are people putting in the chat? Are people actually engaging? That's the question.
So I'll throw in a few comments we've had in the chat here.
Yeah, please do.
So Mike Gray, our very own Mike Gray, has noted that we've got opportunities through Project Community, Practice Lunch and Learns, newsletters, and then of course today. He also makes a note that he really likes the social magnetism image, and after we've seen his dancing, then we can see why. Those that have, what else have we got? Yeah, comment that the Project NHS platform has been Project Futures has been a really good tool for networking.
And there's something here about being the first person to start things off when it comes to this kind of magnetism as well. There's some really interesting research out from Robert Cialdini that shows that when you when you sort of are role modeling this and you're connecting with other people, when you tell people how many other similar people are doing something, how it can increase their sort of their own rate of engagement. They've done a very large scale experiment in the US recently about gym users. So people who are already going to the gym, okay? And what they did was they told them the proportion of people across the US who are also going to the gym. And of course, with such a large population, that answer runs into the millions. So basically, they're making this group of people who already go to the gym recognize that they're part of a much, much wider community who are also doing the same thing. But what they found was that as a result of sharing that information, gym visits by those people rose by 22%. So they increased their own gym visits because actually they're part of a group that regularly go to the gym, and they felt even more connected to that than they had before because they felt connected to a whole group of people. So there is something here around using this interpersonal authority in a way that by building your network, you become part of a bigger group. You often probably are cementing some of your own motivation for getting things done because you can see others are getting it done. And therefore, that's the benefit of any lunch and learn groups, any specific interest groups that you are a member of. So Mike's got it absolutely right. And then the last one, then let's have a little bit of fun with the last one, which is physical authority. It is about establishing how you come across to other people. And this will go back to that question in the virtual world as well, because whilst I operate in both face-to-face and the virtual world, I know that the proportion of face-to-face engagements I have now are much reduced and probably will be for the next few years. I just don't see it changing. The world has shifted. So I need to think. I've always thought about how I engage in a face-to-face way. So if I've got a large group of people, I'm off at Reading Football Club in about 2 weeks' time, I think it is, and I've got a large group of people, so I'll be dressed in a very bright red dress. I'll look like a traffic light, but people will be able to see me from a distance. So I'm always thinking about my physical authority, how I come across to other people. And in this square that you can see me in now, I feel very strongly about coming across in a way that looks engaging, that people can see me. I'm looking down the camera at you already, that I'm really engaging. And there are things we can do to absolutely harm that. I've been working with somebody in the Bank of England this week, and unfortunately, the way he put his camera was, it was so far away that he looked like a sort of little pinprick in the room, where everybody else you could sort of clearly see them, and he was so far back. And it was really interesting to see that he was just not dominating the space. He wasn't there as fully present as others were. And it just shows that in a face-to-face environment, that would not have been an issue, but in a virtual environment, we've got different challenges. So thinking about how you come across. But there's been a whole load of stuff about people using backgrounds. I'm not using my background. You can probably just see up there the picture of my lovely St. Bernard. I'm in my own office this morning. They're not exciting walls, but at least they're mine, because I wanted you to be able to see my body language. And when you put up a background, you can't see it as easily because my fingers start to disappear, don't they, into the background. And so this was a deliberate decision for that physical authority, for you to see more of me and be able to get all of my communication. Point is, we've always done this. We've always built our physical authority. Think about the fact that any job interview you go to, you dress for the interview, don't you? You do put on your best suit. You know, you do make sure that, you know, you've got clean shoes and that you're sort of together. And there is something innately human about this. People connect to other people. And if we are talking about fellowship and making us the most powerful social magnet we can be, we can't get away from the hardwired piece in our brain, which is that we connect with people like us. We connect with people that we think respect us. So if we're bothering to put the effort in and to actually sort of put ourselves across in our best way, then other people pick up on that, and there is a greater emotional connection. So there's a lot of deep-seated stuff there in the physical authority. So just have a challenge to yourself right now about how you're coming across to others. I know my sister-in-law was telling a horrendous story last week in half term about the fact that she inadvertently had her camera on whilst wearing a night dress during an early morning meeting, and she felt that perhaps her credibility had been blown apart somewhat by the fact she was wearing a Mickey Mouse night dress and that she hadn't brushed her hair or anything. I'm sure we've all got those horror stories. But maybe there's something more deliberate about trying to increase our physical authority. So I'll leave you to think about that one. So please put anything you like in the chat, any comments at all. There is one that I've been giving an example of, which is somebody I work with in Parliament. This is how she's looked for the whole of COVID. We've seen the top of her head, but just not the rest of her. And I think that some of her authority, to be fair, has leaked away as a result of that. So it's not great. So I'm going to hand back over to Carl now to see if there are any questions. Anybody wants to put me on the spot and ask me about any aspect of change, not just some of the activities we've done today, which are all a part of the coaching course I teach, but anything at all that anybody wants to ask about, just fire away.
So we haven't got any questions in the stream at the moment. A few comments. Somebody's seen people vaping, my goodness, but smoking indoors since working online. Yeah, that certainly creates
that certainly creates a view of them, doesn't it? Yeah, in terms of physical authority being the key word and it being the NHS. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah,
it's a bit like watching some old films and seeing all them smoking in the films, thinking, what on earth? Yes, what else you got? But we have got a confession that somebody normally wears their PJs on the bottoms and a shirt on top. But I won't. You can look at the chat to see who that was. Thanks, Lily. Oops. So there we go. So we haven't got any more questions.
Okay, people think it's Friday, they've had enough, it's time to go home. That's okay.
There's a question space, a virtual space, is that by definition less formal? Or how do you use that space to and maintain your physical authority? How much do you dress up for a virtual meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are all I think it's about making decisions about how do you want to come across. I think just making those decisions about, well, what connection am I trying to get here? And there is something about sometimes how we put ourselves across, perhaps how we decided to dress sends a message about how well prepared we are, how organized we are. And if we want others to follow our lead, it's this combination of all of these, specialist, interpersonal and physical, that creates that magnetism that unfortunately we can say, oh, I don't want to subscribe to any of this. But the main customer for change is the brains of all of those impacted by the change, those that we need to work differently. And unfortunately, their brains are using all of the hardwired shortcuts to make decisions about whether or not we're a credible force that's worth following. And by looking at this model, I'm just pulling out some of those factors which our brain uses to make those instantaneous decisions. So we can decide to ignore it all, or we can decide to say, maybe I need to pay a bit more attention to one or other of these. We've all got different points at which we come into this, and there's different areas we want to further develop for ourselves. But I did say to you, this would be a personal development piece, and there it is.
Well, we've got one question in, so we're just coming up for time. And so those of you that have been in the competition, capturing those words, get ready for the word at the end. But this question is so in the context of getting that connection and stuff, does it make sense to have an icebreaker preceding team calls when folk don't know each other? So how would you include that into your approach?
Yeah, because ultimately what we're looking for is, if we connect, then when we connect with other people, if we just use the neuroscience for a moment, if we build a connection with people, then we think that connection means that I feel I've got something in common with them. I've just shared a story with them. I've just shared an experience with them. And by building that connection, what happens is that our brains give whatever that person says much more of the benefit of the doubt. So we are less quick to judge. And of course, when we judge negatively. So we are less cynical about what they have to say. We're more open to it. So I think what you've just hit on there is you've hit on the core piece of collaboration, which is we're just going to what our brains want to do. Is if I know you, I am more likely to like you or at least respect you. And therefore, I'm more willing to listen to what you have to say. So you're absolutely right. Start with any connection activity. And you'll be.
Well, someone's just slipped a question in. So if you can sneak a top tip here, any top tips for hybrid working, as we are likely to do more of this going forward?
Right, my absolute top tip, going back to what Albert Morabian research was, whatever you do, put your cameras on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is decide for yourself about your openness, about what you're prepared to share. Because again, this comes down to connectivity. So anybody who's been on anything with me will know that I'm happy to share things like that sometimes I'm working from home, sometimes I'm in my office like this. And if I'm working from home, sometimes they'll see my elderly father come past to give me a cup of tea, or they will have met my dog Santos because he's often on a call. And I've made those decisions about the fact that I am willing to open up my home and be my most authentic self, because I am desperate to connect with all of you. And I think there is that thing about we can take down some of the barriers. And I've also been very vulnerable in front of people. Looking after my elderly father is, as I've often said, the hardest thing I've ever done. And I will tell people that some days that I'm having a pretty awful day. I've had a bit of a bad time with Dad overnight. That vulnerability is also, people can tap into that and go, yeah, I know exactly where she's coming from. I've been up all night with the kids, or I've got the same issue with my own parents. You know, there's a choice here we can make about how we behave virtually and online, that I think absolutely it's not going to go away. There's going to be more of it. So I definitely have a think about how do you want to engage online.
Thank you very much. So we've come to time now. So thank you everybody for participating actively. Thank you, Mel, for sharing more of your good stuff. Much appreciated. And just to confirm that yes, this is going to be recorded, or this has been recorded and will be available afterwards. So have a great rest of Friday and a great weekend, and see you in the next session when we've got in 15 minutes. So time to get a cup of tea and ready for the next session. So thank you very much, one and all.